watch it afterwards. So once again, welcome to Bastian Küntzel, the learner's journey. Welcome to all the participants. Enjoy.
All right, so the learner's journey is a concept that I've been working for a long time with, and in my work it's been a very practical approach to my work as a trainer and facilitator, and generally as a learning experience designer. And today I have the privilege and the honor to talk a little bit about what it's about and how it can be used. But before I go into, like a monologue, I want to make sure that all of you know that you can always ask questions. The chat box is probably great for that. Asha will be monitoring that. And I'd also like to start with a bit of who you are. Of course, not a novel, but who you, in one or two words, who are you, and with what intentions have you joined this meeting today? If you could just type one or two words, one or two sentences into the chat box, that would be really nice to know, like, who is in this room that we can't see, and what are you doing, and particularly also what is the intention that you made this time available today to get something out. All right, I can see to get inspired, to generate stories, to working with narratives. Someone is also working with narratives.
We've got Dora from Italy. Students. Yes, we've got George, we've got Tina from Hanover actually as well. We've got Maria Gabriela from Malta. And we've got fantastic, motivations, as you see, Bastian.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, some people that want to have some practical tools or exercises that they can use with their clients. Some just are curious and just want to learn a new tool, to learn a new approach. Fantastic. All right, so maybe this is what you're needing, and maybe this is something that will add a value to your day-to-day. So let's go. So first of all, let me start with 3 things that I think are true, right? And I don't know them empirically. I think they are true. And maybe you agree with me, or maybe you don't. So let me start with the first one. The first one is learning is story creation. Right? So why do I think that? It's because the idea of how we experience life is in the way that we have an experiencing self and we have a remembering self. And the experiencing self is kind of taking in all the sensory information from the world and just processes it, right? It's kind of the mechanic point of us being in the world. Then the remembering self is the part of us that puts these pieces of information into an idea that we can relate back to, right? And the remembering self is a storyteller, right? The remembering self is not one that is very accurate or one that is very precise, but the remembering self is the part of us that kind of makes sense of the world and then maintains that information so that we can tap into it later on, right? So if learning is about creating memories, is memory creation, then going about in the story way is, I think, a pretty good way, right? The second one that I think is true, and I have some windows in front of my screen that I can't push away. So I can't fully see what you see, but that humans, let's
experience their life.
Experience their life as a story. Exactly. And what I mean with that is that by going through life, we're not just going day by day. We're kind of telling a story of who we are, and every day is a component of that narrative, is a component of that story. And we're the protagonist of our own story, right? So you could think of it as that, you know, you come into a room and you sit down and there's this voice in your head that says, look at this person coming into the room, sitting down, wondering what will happen. Will it be meaningful? Will it not be? No one knows. And we just walk through life this way, right? And so if we experience our life as a story, and if learning is memory creation, and memory creation is through story, then us being the protagonist of those story, that means that learning means that whatever we learn needs to fit into the story that we're already telling, right? It needs to fit into the storyline of this protagonist that we are and that our learners are. And then if we want to create memories for them, they need to fit into that story, right? So essentially what that means is that learning experience design is story making. It's not storytelling. Storytelling can be a great tool to allow someone to have empathy with another protagonist. It is a great tool to tell the bigger picture of a phenomenon maybe. But I prefer to think of learning experience design as story making, so that afterwards, once they have learned the things that they set out to learn and they want to remember it, because only then really it's learning, then they will remember it as a story. So when we create learning experiences, what we're doing anyway is we're creating stories. So we might as well do it consciously, right? Are we cool with that? Are these things that I think are true, do you kind of think that they are true too? Or am I alone? Am I crazy? Okay.
No.
One person agrees. Very good.
One person agrees.
I can go with that. Absolutely. Not crazy, Elena Steiner. Thank you very much. It's always good to hear that. Yes, Kahneman is the one that said experiencing self and remembering self. Very good. We're in the same boat here. We're going in the same direction. I like it. Very good. So there is a tool already on storytelling and on story creation called the hero's journey, developed by a man called Joseph Campbell, who was big into mythologies and a very good scholar of, particularly of religions, but all kinds of religions, not just one specific one, but different mythologies. And he found out through his research that most of them go through a similar structure, and he called it the hero's journey. Right, and he had 17 steps in his hero's journey, and I know some people who've used these 17 steps to create learning experiences, but to me it's a little too specific to the mythology, right? And there's also some gender things in there that I'm not fully on board with, like the temptation and the atonement with the father and all of these things. But it's a really, really useful tool, right? In essence, it means there is a light and a dark side to every story, right? The light is the known, is the order, it's life, basically. And then there's the dark, the unknown, the chaos and the death. And every story goes from the light into the darkness, back into the light. If you don't have this circle to a story, it's probably not a great story, and it's probably not a story worth remembering. And every developmental experience also goes through this. We are in a space where we know how things work, then suddenly something happens to us that we don't know how it works, and we kind of learn it and we bring it back, and it becomes something that we know, right? It goes from the known that is not enough to the unknown, and then back into the known. The unknown becomes the known. It gets integrated into the field of knowledge. So if that is how great stories are, and I mean, you can probably go through every book that you love, every novel that you love, every movie that you love, and you can identify this very, very essentialistic structure of there is a protagonist, They are in a space that they understand. They get thrown into a space that they don't understand, and they re-emerge from that chaos, right? So if we want to do this with a group of learners, right, we have to understand that they exist in a world that is theirs, right? The learning experience that we set out to design is never in a neutral space. It's never in a vacuum. It's always happening within an environment that already exists. It's kind of the world of this learning experience, of the seminar, of this university course, of this training course, of this webinar, whatever, right? There's always a world around it. And if we want to make sure that the story that we set out to create with our learners, then we need to place it securely in the environment of this world of the learners, right? And I would say there's a few different layers to that, right? There's the stakeholders, which are not people who are holding a stake, but it's the people who have something to do with this, right? Let's take this webinar right here. We have you, all of you who are participating in this. We have SIETAR Europa, who has an interest in organizing these webinars. We have me as a stakeholder in this, who has an interest in making time available and sharing something. We have all of these different stakeholders. In a training course within the corporate environment, we might have where we have a bunch of leaders participating. We have the company as such. We have the people that are being led. We have the people that are secondhand influencers. I would say a stakeholder in this webinar right now are kind of your participants then, your potential participants should you choose to use something that you've learned here today, right? All of these are stakeholders. They all have needs that are somehow touching the learning experience, right? Every need touches in a stronger or weaker way the learning experience, and it influences it, and it creates a pressure, or it creates a limitation, or it creates an opportunity, it creates an access, or it creates other kinds of things that we need to be aware about, because these needs, these influences are going to be there, and we can ignore them, and then they will be silently influencing the learning experience, or we can very consciously address them. And then we have the context, right? The context is like the amount of time, the amount of people, the degree to which people know each other, where something is happening. Is it happening virtually right now here, where all of you are in very different environments and we are here together now, and once this is over, you're back in wherever you are, right? It could be, are we in a forest? Are we inside the offices of the company that we're working with? Are we in a classroom at school, etc., right? All of those, again, create opportunities, but they also create limitations. They influence what is possible and what is impossible. And we need to be very consciously aware the environment, the larger environment within which we create the learner's journeys, right? Because if we ignore them, we can't make the best out of them. But if we really consciously address all of them, then we can really milk each potential for whatever it is there to give to us, right? All right, then we come to the learner's journey. Steve Harmon, who is a storyteller who works in TV and a screenwriter, has used this example from, or this work from Joseph Campbell, and created a much simpler version of it, right? It doesn't have 17 steps, it has 8 steps. And to me, it's a lot more intuitive, it's a little bit more simple, but that means it's a lot more adaptable too, right? So the 8 steps here are you, right? The protagonist. There's a need. The protagonist goes in search, finds something, takes it, returns, and has changed or is ready to change the world that he or she has known before, right? And to me, these 8 steps are on the one hand great for storytelling, but they are also really, really useful. I've at least found them to be really useful as design principles for creating learning experiences. And I've used this for conferences for hundreds of people. I've used this for a retreat for 7 people. I've used this for a 2-day training course. I've used this for a 1-day training course. I've used it to co-design a semester-long university course, right? It's very adaptable. And so I would like to go through each step and kind of talk a little bit about what I think is important in that step, what kind of needs to happen so that the next step is a logical consequence of this previous step. And overall, it's a very logical experience, and it's a very flow-like momentum that brings learners through this learning experience. Right. Okay, so the protagonist. The protagonist is the learner. For me, that's so important. The protagonist is the hero, right? And so we need to root the process of learning in the learner's world, right? To me, it's a little bit like saying, I see you, right? And I don't know if you've watched the movie Avatar. Maybe you do. The way how the Na'vi say, I love you, is by saying, I see you, right? I think it's a very beautiful way to express this, right? In Uganda, there's a specific language in which to say hello to someone is to say, I see you, right? It's a very, to me, it's a very beautiful expression of, I see all of you and you are important for me right now, right? And if we can start a learning experience with this message being delivered to the participants, to the learners, to say, I see you, this is for you. This is about you. This is not about me. This is about you. This might be something that is the right thing for you. I think it's a very important step, and it's a very beautiful step, and it's a very powerful step. And it can be done in many different ways. It can be done by allocating some time in the beginning of a learning experience, depending on how much time we have, to really allow people to express who they are and what their needs are and what their world looks like. But it can also be done in pre-learning event interviews or conversations. It can be done in many different ways. But the core importance of it, I think, is that the learners really have this feeling, not just because we manipulated that, but they have this strong feeling of, yes, this is for me. This is not someone else's thing that I get to participate in, but this is actually for me, right? And then we can go to the need. This little dragon here, it has 2 signs around its neck that say sense of urgency and sense of necessity. Because if we don't have a sense of urgency and if we don't have a sense of necessity, it's very difficult to do the work that is learning, right? So we need to, by tapping into the world of the learners, by really acknowledging it, on caring about it and wanting to root the learning experience in it, we can also see then together, what is a meaningful gap for them, right? Where are they? Where do they want to go? And is the difference between those two meaningful enough that the learners are willing to invest time and care and attention and work, right? Because it's work to learn something. It's basically, we need to identify how things are and how they could be, and to do this in a collaborative process. And we can do this by talking to them and finding out how the world looks like, but we can also do this very, very well with experiential learning exercises, right? By really showcasing and allowing people to participate in experiences that show them, oh, I thought I'm good in that and I'm not. I thought I'm able to see what's going on and I'm not, or I thought I was good in these kinds of group dynamics and actually I could be better. And that is then an emotional connection to the learning experience that, to me, the most meaningful thing that we can give to a learner in the beginning of a learning experience is a question mark, right? but not one that we give them, right? But one that is theirs, one where they can say, yes, this bothers me now. This tickles me now. This has triggered my curiosity, and I want to investigate time and attention to learn more about this, right? A really good, powerful question mark is the biggest motivator that will keep participants engaged, right? And then they go, right? And we can do that in many different ways, but there needs to be a very clear difference of, okay, we are still in the known world, and now we go into the unknown. Now it's gonna go crazy. Now we're not so sure anymore what will happen. Now it's very difficult to control this now, right? It's a jump. And we can do this in learning environments in many different ways. Sometimes it's just the coffee break, right? It could be, I've done this in conferences where we use this stage as the point where people went from one place to another place. Okay, I have here a question, the comment about what type of question. It's very difficult to say, right? The question that starts with, what, in the intercultural fields, for example, why is it that I think I see the world objectively when really I see it subjectively? What implications does that have for my work? It could be, why did this experience at work bother me more than it really should if I look at it objectively, but it really bothers me and I want to understand what cultural roots are triggered here. It could be, why is our team not working in a way that we all think and agree it should, but somehow we can't get it there, right? So these types of questions that are establishing a forward momentum towards finding then an answer and being motivated enough, or the answering of the question is important enough that attention and time and care is then invested by the learners. I hope that answered the question a little bit. All right, so when we go and when we jump, we're basically pushing the participants then, or we invite the participants, we open a door towards a space where then they can be challenged. But it's also our task as learning facilitators to make sure that they are safe, right? Psychologically and physically safe, right? But challenged nonetheless. Right, when you probably know this concept of comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone, right? When we're in the comfort zone, we're not learning too much. When we're in the panic zone, we're too busy with surviving this that we're also not learning very much. But when we're right there in this Goldilocks space of it's challenging enough so that it's interesting, right? It's challenging enough so that it's I have a feeling like I'm developing, but it's safe enough so that I can make mistakes and it won't mean my death, right? I can make mistakes and it won't mean ridicule. I can make mistakes and it won't spoil my honor, right? So then when we can establish this environment of challenging and safe, and we have jumped with the group into the unknown, that's then the search phase. And that's probably where most learning experiences will spend most of the time. Is then where the challenge then happens, right? It's where we experiment, it's where we study, it's where we learn, it's where we are exposed to new information, it's where we train things maybe. So we can explore, we can experience, we can practice, we can fail interestingly. Again, this, I think, this idea of allowing our learners to fail in interesting ways is one of the biggest gifts that we as learning facilitators can provide them, where they feel safe enough that failing can be an option, but that failing is always taking place in an interesting way so that it can fuel a new step of learning and then repeat, right? And this is where a lot of learning experiences that then have trouble keeping the attention of the learners, they start there, right? They start with, all right, let's study, right? Let's teach, let's maybe even practice, but they don't spend time in really embedding that into the world of the learners. So this is where we do all the stuff that we tend to be really good at, right? Where we have all our toolkits, where we do the where we do the exercises, where we do the case studies, where we do the forum theater, whatever methodology we're comfortable with, chances are they are about challenging our participants and helping them to explore, experience, and practice new things, right? So then at the bottom point, right, in the darkest moment, probably it won't be too dark, but at some point the participants will find something. And Campbell calls this the meeting with the goddess. And I find that a really nice turn of phrase there. But it's about this encounter with the piece of knowledge or with the skill or with the perspective or with the knowledge that you want to bring, that the learner wants to bring into their own world, into their own context later on, right? And that's then the aha moment where the learner goes, right, I understand this now, right? This now makes sense to me. And this is an incredibly personal moment, right? If you do an evaluation round at the end of a training or at the end of a seminar or whatever it is that where you facilitate learning, chances are different people will say different things that were the biggest learning points for them, right? Because that's a really, really personal thing. And sometimes we may have to control that a little bit harder because we really do need everyone to understand what the, I don't know, emergency routines are when there's a fire. But sometimes in a leadership course or in an intercultural learning experience, it may be a little bit more up to the participants to make that encounter with this knowledge, with this idea that maybe they were looking for, or maybe they didn't even know that they were looking for that, but it's the thing that resonates with them. It's the thing that then becomes theirs. So they need to take it, right? And sometimes we just assume that the idea that people have gotten, they will just take it by themselves. But I think there's value in actually making a conscious decision to help or to facilitate or to guide our participants in this incorporation, right? Where the learners make it their own. Where it's not just, okay, I now understand how this cultural dimension works, but where they've reflected on and discussed and maybe decided on how they can make this, or what can be their way of doing this in their own world, in their own workplace, in their own things. And yes, of course, the find place can take place in any moment, but it'll probably be then part of yet a new circle, right? When they go back home, and then it might have fermented, right? And now suddenly it's the thing that it needs to be. And the find place or the find stage is probably the one that is the least under our control as learning facilitators, which is a very frustrating thing. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just say, okay, we have a methodology that ensures that we know that people will definitely learn a certain thing. We don't. We can open doors, we can point spotlights, but then this finding something and taking it, that's then a lot more in the agency and responsibility of the learner. But if we have empowered them enough to really understand that this is their thing, that this is their journey, that this is for them and about them, I think it's a lot more likely that they will take this chance and that they will take this learning point and bring it then as they return. And again, very often the return is just people going back home, right? Or people leaving the training room and going back into their office. Or people now going to do whatever your afternoon is looking like for you, right? But I think it also here adds value if we very consciously address this and say, okay, let's think together about how you will integrate this thing that you've learned here, that you've made your own now, into the complexities of your work. Because maybe there will be, people who will be opposed to you now having a more gender inclusive approach to speaking, right? Or maybe now some people will oppose to you leading your team in a different way that is company culture, right? Or maybe some people will really want you to do that, but to really respecting the reality of the learners and then strategizing for them in a very pragmatic and strategic way. How can you implement this in your world, right? How can you integrate this into your everyday life and make sure that it hasn't just been something that you had fun with for an afternoon, but that it has added value every day for you, or just sustainably for you, so that you get the biggest bang for your buck there, right? And then hopefully we will have that change, right? Where the sense of urgency is now not so urgent anymore, but we've become friends with it, and we've created a new normal together with the learners, a new normal where they now know things that previously they didn't, a new normal where they now are able to do things that previously they weren't, a new normal where they now can see things from perspectives that previously they were not able to see, etc., etc. But that new normal should hopefully be kind of the other side of the gap that we've identified before with them, right? The other side of this, how things could be, is now how things are, or at least how they are, where they have increased action potential in all forms or settings, and they can just, be propelled by this learning experience, by the learning points, by the insights that they have gathered and gained as we accompany them on that journey, right? So this is, in a nutshell, what the learner's journey is all about. It's using storytelling as a design principle to create powerful learning experiences, right? It's not about storytelling. It's about storytelling as a design principle, so that we can create powerful learning experiences that are worthy of being remembered, that are worthy of becoming a story that people can use to tap back into the learning that we've done with them. It's a framework. It's not a method, right? It's not something where you sit down and say, okay, let's go. It's a framework. It can accommodate all kinds of different learning experiences. And it's a perspective, right? It's just a way of thinking about learning. It's a way of thinking about a learner that, at least for me, it's really, really helpful. It's very practical for me. It's a perspective that I use in every learning experience that I have the honor to be invited to facilitate, right? So there's a little website where there's a few materials and also different resources where it can be gotten. Also, you can read some reviews of it there. Joanna was so kind to write one of them. So there's many different ways. I think George Simons, who's also here, he also wrote one of them. And yeah, so for the short time, we have 20 minutes, so we can actually engage in a bit of a dialogue. Does this resonate with you? Is it applicable in your work? Does it fit in your world? Or do you have any other kind of question? All right. We have one question here. Do you tell the story to the participants as you go, so that they are telling them this themselves, this story of learning, as a reinforcement of their memory process? I don't tend to tell the learners that the way how this was made has used a specific methodology, because it tends to distract information. It distracts them from what we're doing to the process of how we're doing it, right? So I once did it that I was working with a team that was taking a bigger team on a retreat, and I used this methodology with them in a collaborative process to design the program for it. And in the middle of the program, as things were really hard and frustrating, and we were, discussing and didn't seem to end, but it was important. One of the leaders, she said, yeah, it's all okay. We're supposed to be frustrated. We're in the darkness right now, so things are hard, but we're gonna get back up. So she was really, really keen on understanding where she is in the process, but it was probably very confusing to the people who were not involved in creating the program. So I don't tend to do that. Okay, Mary Lynch says that she is just about to begin an 8-week workshop series, and this will fit into it perfectly. Wonderful, that's great. Now, does your book provide concrete examples how to use this framework? Yes, I provide 3 examples. One is a conference, one is a team retreat with a larger team that created a mission and vision value statements for the company, where we used this methodology to create that workshop, and a conference, and I think a very like a 7-people retreat that I used this work for. So these 3 examples.
Strategic workshop.
Are in the work. I'm sorry. What did you say?
The strategic workshop.
Yes, a strategic workshop, exactly.
Yeah. Really, really fantastic way of presenting also the learner's journey. Thank you so much. It's very, very story when you talk about it. And this is also something I'm really also keen to do, to work with a learning journey, just like you have mentioned, not really to tell the people what's going on with them. So really just that it's a framework for you as a designer, but not really to share this secret knowledge with the participants, because it's distracting.
It can be distracting. Like, since I know about this hero's journey, I watch movies differently, right? I kind of have the analytic track, always thinking, all right, does this make sense in the learner's journey or in the hero's journey? And sometimes when I go with my kids to watch a movie and I come back home and I tell my wife, like, no, that movie, that wasn't so good. They didn't, follow through with the storyline of the protagonist in a way that brings them back into the light or whatever. So, it can ruin the experience a little bit. So sometimes it's important that the learners are in the experience for them, and we are making sure that they are on their journey, because our task is to drive the journey, right? To guide the journey, to provide the framework for it. But if we make it too much about the framework, then it doesn't become so important.
Yeah.
For teachers training, for teachers training, it may be important for them to know about the learners. Yeah. Yes, of course. When I do a training for trainers next week, I'm going to do a training for trainers, and we allocate a whole day to just learning about the methodology. Then, of course, if it's a learning journey about learning journeys, then yes, definitely included. But
and Bastian, there is also one question by Kalaivani. Have you ever had a case where there was a conflict between the story the trainer wanted to create and the learner's story?
Could you say it again?
Have you ever had a case where there was a conflict between the story the trainer wanted to create and the learner's story?
Yeah. Like it depends on who you get to talk to before you set out, but sometimes, particularly in like management retreats or in leadership courses, or when you work with a team that is always working together and you really step into their world, they may have a story that is about I need to make sure that my boss sees me, right? And that is the gap that they need to fill. And it's not about what the workshop is about for them, it's about something else, right? Essentially, I would argue that every kind of distracted learner, every kind of disengaged learner, every kind of disruptive learner, they are telling a story about themselves where that is the necessary thing right now, right? And their gap is I need my peers to see me as cool. So I'm going to act in a way that means I don't need this, I know this already, right? So that happens unfortunately often, but the more I found, the more I've invested time in really seeing my learners, the more I can then tap into that and say, all right, let me grab you and just look in your eyes in the coffee break or whatever and say, this is for you and I'm here for you. And this seems to not be for you right now. So tell me what's going on. Let me understand you so that I can know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they feel like, okay, I've been seen now, then it tends to go better. Right?
Kinga has got also a very interesting question. What about learning situation when participants of the training are not aware of their need? So for example, the need is unconscious.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, experiential learning exercises in the beginning of the training are all about that, right? Maybe baranga or magic stick or, like the richness of the toolbox that we have as intercultural trainers are, a lot of them are geared towards showing people their unconscious biases. They are geared towards making explicit to them how maybe ethnocentristic they may be, right? And that's then what it's about, where our specific competence comes in giving them the question mark that they didn't even know they had, or that they didn't know they might want to have, right? Or where they might, but where then they can say, no, I'm happy with my ethnocentrism, right? I'm happily sexist, homophobic, ethnocentristic, racist. And then we can say, okay, then this is probably not for you. Right, but at least they've made that conscious decision then, right? Or at least we've put them in a position where they can say, like, no, this is not for me. But to me, these kinds of experiences, experiential learning exercises, are super powerful in the beginning of trainings to bring out these unconscious incompetencies.
Yeah, we've got also one question that goes directly in this direction, actually. I like the idea of failing in interesting ways. What kind of failures have you found to have the greatest impact?
The biggest failures that I found to be of great impact is where participants would intuitively think this is easy. And then when they go through the experience, they find out it's hard. Like, I don't know if you know the magic stick exercise. I use it very often. It's where the group gets a stick on the fingers and they need to lay it down on the floor. And intuitively, it sounds like, yeah, duh, that's not hard. But then what happens is that the stick, for many reasons, goes up, right? And it leads to a lot of frustrations. People think others are cheating. People think others are maybe saboteurs. People doubt themselves. They doubt others. It's crazy, right? And then you can work with that. And then you can work, okay, what happens when, normalcy expectations are violated? But it's these kinds of failures where someone might think, I'm okay with this, or I'm good with this, or this is easy. And then it turns out it's hard, right? Where you think like, yeah, I can see what's happening in this picture, and then someone else sees something else, and then you suddenly have to do something together, and you find out, oh no, it's hard, right? And then that's really powerful for me when when you can create this kind of frustration that's kind of fun, but it's also kind of frustrating, right? And then to fail with laughter, but to still fail but be bothered with like, damn, that we should have been able to do that and we weren't able to do that, and that doesn't fit in my image of who I am. I am someone who's able to do that, and suddenly I wasn't able to do that, and then that really creates this, this juice, the fuel that then feeds into this momentum that goes forward.
Yeah. Thank you. We've got also a very, very inspiring question posed by Dora. it's about relocation, or better say repatriation. So she has learned about this method theoretically applied to the journey of people who live abroad for a while and then repatriate. Have you ever worked with this? And if yes, do you have any examples or highlights you would like to share?
I haven't worked with people who repatriated. I work with people who expatriate, but I haven't worked with repatriation. So I can't give you, from my personal experiences, anything concrete there. But I think it's because this work with expats, if it's about expatriation or repatriation, is very personal, right? So there you can really work very closely with their own stories, with their fears, with the things that they may be anxious about, et cetera, and work in a very personal way. From a lot of stories that I heard from people who work with repatriation is that, how will I bring this into my old life? Will anybody care? Will my old friends want to know what happened to me or not? Will I, what will happen in my job now, et cetera, et cetera. So these are kind of the is and could be, right? It could be great. It could also be not great. And then the learner's journey is then, okay, how can we amplify the potentials for great, and how can we deal with the potentials for not great? And that then is then the way back into an old world that was known and unknown, and is kind of in between this, right?
Yeah, Dora, maybe just a short suggestion, because I work as an intercultural coach as well, and I use lots of narrative methods, and the hero's journey is one of them. Actually, also during the expat coachings, I address the hero's journey, and I tell them, what do you think, what is this elixir, this reward you are going to bring back also when you repatriate? So when the 3 years or 5 years are over. So this is also the way you could all even address this this reward history already in the expatriation trainings, so that the people are really proactive, how they really want to profit from this time they are spending abroad. Just the suggestion.
Okay, we have one question here from Elena Steiner. I appreciate why you have to root the process in the learner's world. How can you do that with a really diverse audience? Or am I missing the idea of the protagonist? Yeah, like the more diverse the audience, the more challenging it becomes to really address each person, right? If we have like the different ways to think of this. On the one hand, each learner individually is a protagonist of their own story, right? And if the audience is really diverse, if your participant group is really diverse, you need to make sure that you kind of address each different perspective there in a way that resonates with them. And that requires a lot of competence, basically, and a lot of care and a lot of attention to that diversity. Sometimes it's also that you have a kind of an ensemble protagonist, right? When you work with the team, or when you work with the department of a company, or when you work with something like that, it's a little bit like, the Lord of the Rings or the Avengers, where, like there's a lot of different protagonists in there. They're all complex and diverse, but they're on the same journey together, right? They all want to defeat Thanos, or they all want to bring the ring to, the Mountain of Doom. There's an ensemble character to it, and then you can be on that journey with them in like you can think of it in a different way, right? And but particularly in classrooms, particularly in universities, I find it's sometimes really difficult to understand, okay, is this person here because the gap they need to fill is they need a certificate that they participated in this course. They don't have it yet. They want to have it. That's why they're here, right? That's the gap. But that's all they want. And who is here because they're really curious about the content, right? And then at least from my perspective, it's completely fine to say, okay, if you're here because you need to have the thing, then these are the things that you need to give me to get the thing. And that's our transaction. And it's fine, No, it does need to be more than that. And then if there are people where I see like, all right, there's a sparkle in the eye, they're really curious about this, then I say, okay, let's find out your journey, right? And then that's a little bit more rewarding for both of us. Then. But it's, yeah, you can't always reach everyone, of course, right? But the intention to want to, I think, is a very positive intention at least.
So there are so many compliments, Bastian. I know you are too humble to read them aloud, but I cannot resist. It's wonderful to read them. Thank you so much. And also, the brilliant webinar, great content, and such insightful answer. Yes. Where can the people buy your book? And also, where can they buy the magic stick? Oh, you made people curious.
I use this for Magic Stick. It's every, supply shop, you can buy one of those, And if you just go on YouTube and you look for Magic Stick or Helium Stick, it's sometimes called, you will find thousands of examples. The method is mega simple. It's the competence then of you as a facilitator, and how you debrief it. That is, of course, the more tricky one. Yeah. And Molly asked when and where is your next Train the Trainers? Well, next week I do it with the German-French Youth Foundation for people who train others in that context. So it's not an open training for trainers now, but maybe in the context of the next SIETAR Europa or in the SIETAR Polska Congress, the next one, maybe we will think of something there.
Yeah, cool.
If there is an interest.
Yeah.
And the website is www.learners-journey.com. It's a very simple one, and that will get you to the book page of my website, which is www.incontro-training.com. Yes, Asha just wrote it in.
Yeah. So, and yes, we are having 1 more minute for the very last question. So
Molly wants to know if I organize Train the Trainers in Germany. Well, if you organize one, I will come and run it.
Yes.
And we can talk later about it if you want.
Sure. Thank you very, very much. And thank you, Bastian, for this really fantastic webinar. Fantastic input, fantastic facilitation from your side.
Thank you.
And I would love to ask those of you who are still online, we still have 3 minutes left to participate in our poll and to fill in our feedback so that we as SIETAR Europa virtual team also get the fantastic feedback, not only in the form of your chat, but also additionally in this form. So I'm going to yes, to start it right now, and please be so kind and put your answers in the box that has appeared on your screens this very minute. The webinar, the value of it, the speaker's comment of topic, the speaker's effectivity of online presentation, and last but not least, of course, thank you very much for attending. Whenever you've got any comments, you are very welcome to write us an email to our virtual team so that we can improve, modify, and yes, just offer more and more webinars that are bringing value to your practical field. Thank you. Thank you for filling in the poll and for all your comments. Yes, we are going to upload the webinar on YouTube pretty soon. It has been recorded, and we are going to post also the link on all the social media channels so that you can follow up. Thank you. Thank you very, very cordially for your attention. Thank you, Bastian, once again for your energy and time. And we are looking forward to seeing you at another webinar or also cross-cultural coffee break in December. Have a nice weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.